Why is the measure of love loss? This question opens Jeanette Winterston's haunting novel, Written on the Body. The book is written in the voice of a nameless and non-gendered narrator who falls in love with Louise, a married woman who's dying of leukemia. Winterston's narrator's initial expectation that the experience of human love will follow a pre-established story is challenged by the reality of loving someone so immediately mortal. How do we love someone or something we know won't last forever? How do we live a life that honors equally love and pain, darkness and light? Parashat Yitro tells the story of Bnei Yisrael camping at the base of Mount Sinai, waiting for Moshe to ascend to receive the 10 Commandments from God. The Israelites are subject to what Abraham Maslow called a peak experience, and now they must figure out how to live in a world that has been instantaneously transformed permanently before their eyes. And like Winterston's love-drunk narrator, they have to write a new story in light of a world that contains both beauty and ugliness, order and disorder. וכל העם רואים את הקולות ואת הלפידים ואת קול השופר ואת ההר השן וירא העם וינועו ויעמדו מרחוק. And all of the people saw the voices or witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the blare of the shofar and the smoking mountain. They saw all of this and trembled and stood far away. The Zohar reads, those voices were carved upon the darkness, cloud and the fog, as visible as the body is. And they saw whatever it was they saw, and heard what they heard from within the darkness, the cloud and the fog. Torah came into our world not through light and calm, but through darkness and disorder. Not through pure beauty, but through ugly weather and flowers. An experience so confounding and so inarticulable that it causes trembling and distance rather than closeness. Similarly, the Jewish day begins at darkness, at nightfall, not when the sun rises. And I feel that this reflects one of the holiest messages and lessons of my life, which is that it is impossible to experience joy without also experiencing sorrow, and vice versa. As author Ross Gay writes in his essay collection, Inciting Joy, what happens if joy is not separate from pain? What if joy and pain are fundamentally tangled up with one another? Or even more to the point, what if joy is not only entangled with pain or suffering or sorrow, but is also what emerges from how we care for each other through those things? What if joy, instead of refuge or relief from heartbreak, is what effloresces from us as we help each other carry our heartbreaks? Which is to say, what if joy needs sorrow, or what Zadie Smith in her essay Joy calls the intolerable for its existence? Or, as Winterston's narrator says of their love for the dying Louise, she opened up the dark places as well as the light. That's the risk you take. That is the risk we take, and it's a risk that Bnei Yisrael took by accepting the Torah. So how then do we go on living after such an earth-shattering experience? What do we do with the hole that it carves out in us? What do we do with the spectral haunting that it produces? I remember in my first year of rabbinical school in a liturgy seminar, learning from Rabbi Jan Urbach that life is like a sine curve that goes up and down like this, with the middle here. And it has these high peaks and low valleys. And if we try to limit the amount of sadness that we can feel by chopping off the bottom half, the lowest part of the curve, we've then immediately lowered the possible height of our joy. And living with the Torah and truly loving Hashem, loving God, gives us the ability not just to withstand hardship, but to reshape the very clay of our sorrow into something of beauty and light. And this is very much in line with the writings of Rabbi Nachman, who said, yet greater still is to gather courage to actually pursue gloom and to introduce it into the joy, such that the gloom itself turns into joy. And the things in my life that I'm most proud of and that bring me the most joy, I found not by ignoring or sidestepping painful experiences, but by fully embracing them and turning them into experiences of stunning beauty and grace. There's no joy without pain, and that also means there's no suffering without beauty. People sometimes ask me or other people, based on certain events, how can you possibly believe in God in the light of X, Y, or Z? But I wonder precisely how one can see sorrow without also seeing God's love. To tell of God and Torah is to tell of beauty and pain together in one breath. And twice daily, in the blessing before the Shema, we affirm the entrance of Torah into the world as a profound act of God's love. This extension of love was not only loud, smoky, and terrifying, not peaceful or quiet, but it also models love as something that can bring permanent changes into our world in a dramatic way for which we have zero context. And when Bnei Yisrael took in the scene at Mount Sinai, they had no way of knowing what would come next or exactly how the world would change. And such is the case for many acts of love, which tend not to change us slowly or silently, but rather often untidily and all at once. It was Lemony Snicket who said that love can change a person the way a parent can change a baby, awkwardly and often with a great deal of mess. Accepting the Torah, like all great experiences of love, means opening oneself up to the possibility of heartbreak and anguish. Winterston's narrator calls the prospect of loving a mortal person an expensively ruinous experiment, which is about as apt a description as any. So how do we actually go about living a life that equally honors the full spectrum of human life, of the beauty and of the horror? How do we live lives that fully honor the experience at Mount Sinai? This is where mitzvot and law come in. Loving, whether that is loving a human or God, is inherently an experience of being bound. It requires tying our fates to that of another, and in that sense, restricting our freedom to a degree. However, that needn't be seen as a bad thing. The great Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore offers a superb metaphor. I have on my table a violin string. It is free to move in any direction I like. If I twist one end, it responds. It's free. But it's not free to sing. So I take it and I fix it into my violin. I bind it, and when it is bound, it is free for the first time to sing. Love means permanently being tied to the story of someone else, with no control over what that story will look like. We are bound to Hashem despite not knowing what God will choose for us, and we and God continue to grow. But perhaps our stories only have meaning when they are bound to that of another, whether a person or God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeitiacha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. I, Hashem, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt and the house of slavery. I believe that it is on the very first word of the first of the 10 Commandments, Anochi, which means I, that the rest of the Torah and the world itself stands. The world permanently changed at the moment that God uttered the word Anochi. The Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael teaches that when God said Anochi, the mountains shook and the hills swayed. Everything had to shake and tremble for Torah to come into the world. The Zohar teaches that Anochi is the very name of the Shekhinah, which is the presence of God. The very presence of God who went down into Egypt with slavery with us and suffered along with us at every junction. In the Talmud, in Shabbat 105a, it says that Anochi is an acronym. Ana nafshi ketavit yehavit. I have inscribed my soul and given it to you. My soul and my essence I have written and I have given it to you. Rabbat Tamar Elad Applebaum, my dear Rabbi, teacher, and friend, has a teaching on this concept that truly changed my life. She explains that the Anochi is the story that I bring with me when I experience the law. Do not murder has no meaning if I do not say, something has happened to me. Don't steal is meaningless if I don't share how someone stole something from me. So by giving the 10 Commandments, and especially by uttering the word Anochi, the Shekhinah told us her story. She told us she was hurt by Bnei Yisrael and their misdeeds, but instead of leaving us, she chose to give us the Torah and to teach us how to love each other. The Torah is the story of how people hurt God, but it's also about hope and ultimately comfort, nechama. So too, when we tell our stories, we are giving our souls to the people we love. We are giving the fullness of our pain and joy, and in that gift, we are making beauty from ugliness. This is exactly how we live the lives that this parsha urges us to. We tell our honest stories and bring other people to redemption through them. The Rebbe of Radomsk said that when we say Anochi, when we acknowledge the fullness of the things that have happened to us, we complete our personal exodus from Egypt, from the narrowness. Liberation is never a solo endeavor. Our own redemption is deeply tied to that of the people around us. Rabbi Tamar teaches that when we say Anochi, we are trying to warn people about a danger in the world. But what if we also alerted them to the good? Or maybe more precisely, what if we did both? When I say Anochi or me too about the bad things that have happened to me, I also teach about the beauty that that pain has brought to me. And there is in this a final peculiarity of this first of the 10 commandments, because the other 9 are all very practical, obvious commandments. Don't steal, don't kill, honor your father and mother. But how is the statement, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, how is that a commandment? And this brings up a question among some commentators about whether or not there is a commandment to believe in God. But I want to take this in a slightly different direction. Anochi is a commandment, and we fulfill it by teaching others about both the joys and the sorrows of the world. We fulfill it by saying, me too. We fulfill it by saying, I have seen God, and she was darkness, and she was light. Winterston's narrator never does find an answer for why we measure love by loss, but they do learn one important lesson after Louise dies. And if anyone had said that this was the price, I would have agreed to pay it. That surprises me, that with the hurt and the mess comes a shift of recognition. It was worth it. Love is worth it. I have never lost without feeling that the love was still worth it. Never have I suffered in a way that I wish I could take back. It was, in the end, worth it. I don't necessarily know how to tie that in a neat bow, and neither does our narrator. The final line of our book, I don't know if this is a happy ending, but here we are, let loose in open fields. I don't know what it means for life to have a happy ending. We are all, in the words of Mayim Bialik's character from The Big Bang Theory, subject to entropy, decay, and eventual death. So I've given up searching for that elusive happy ending. What I can do, and what we can all do, is to remain open to Torah and to love, whatever the cost. On that note, I want to conclude with the last paragraph of the poem called When Love Arrives by Sarah Kay and Phil Kay. Maybe love is only there for a month. Maybe love is there for every firework, every birthday party, every hospital visit. Maybe love stays. Maybe love can't. Maybe love shouldn't. Love arrives exactly when love is supposed to, and love leaves exactly when love must. When love arrives, say, welcome. Make yourself comfortable. If love leaves, ask her to leave the door open behind her. Turn off the music and listen to the quiet and whisper, thank you for stopping by. So now, to conclude, it's traditional that we thank some of the people that have gotten us to this place, both in the past and now. So we'll do it briefly because I've already taken enough of your time, but in no particular order. To my deans, Rabbi Ayelet Cohen and Rabbi Stephanie Ruske, for having seen me through the past 4.5 years and all the work that has gone into that. To Rabbi Julia Andelman, who has also spent a lot of time offering job advice and staying late to help me work on my resume and interview skills. To Rabbi Eliezer Diamond for leading a fantastic mincha and being an incredible professor. To Rabbi Jan Urbach for many, many lessons learned and for helping me edit these words. To Rabbi Guy Austrian, who was my mentor last year when I was the intern at the Fort Tryon Jewish Center. To two people in Israel, Rabbi Dr. Eliora Peretz, a great friend, mentor, teacher, and Rebbe, who's my first Musar teacher. Thank you for opening myself to my own soul. To Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum, also an incredible Rebbe and friend. I wouldn't be here without you. To my best friends, including Shalhevet Kahana, Rabbi Tanya Farber, Malka Svei, and online Dr. Rebecca Berenbaum. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would have at least 4 best friends, I would not have believed you. So thank you for everything. To my mother, who raised me on her own and came in from Ohio today. Thank you to my cat, Igaz, for always curling up on me and sleeping on my lap while I wrote these words. I would also like to thank myself. No one gets anywhere without help from a lot of other people, but I think we also need to recognize our own gifts and our own contributions, and I wouldn't have gotten here without a lot of really hard work. And last but not least, I want to thank Hashem, God. I don't know if I would have ever chosen this path for myself, so I'm very, very grateful for having been put on it. Thank you to everyone, mentioned and not mentioned, virtual and in person. I know that I'm not always the easiest student, friend, or daughter, so I thank you for loving me and loving me through it all. And we will conclude with saying Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Afterwards, please join me for a reception that I have prepared with a lot of foods that represent the different parts of me and a little l'chaim. Yet Gadal v'yet Kadash Shmei Rabbah. V'yamad yivrach Yerutei v'yamlich Malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lomei almaya. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidei Hon ve'al kol Talmidei Hon ve'al kol me'an de'askin v'oraita adi ve'yatra hadein v'di b'chol atar ve'atar Yehei le'hon u'lechon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamim v'chayin v'arichin v'zona v'vicha u'ferkana min kadam v'hon divishmaya v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu barachamav ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.